Good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Danielle, and I'm the Assistant Student Ministry Director here at Calvary. Whether you're new here with us or you've been here for a while, we'd love to connect with you. Simply scan the QR code on the back of the seat in front of you. You'll find easy ways to connect, serve, and give. Before we jump into the service, let's take a look at some things coming up for you and your family. We all desire sexual integrity, but we struggle with knowing where to start. That's why we're offering a confidential course called Sexual Integrity 101. This 8-week course is for anyone who wants to find freedom from the effects of unwanted sexual behaviors or betrayal, or for anyone who wants to help others. This is a safe, grace-filled process designed to provide understanding, healing, and freedom from unwanted sexual behavior. This course will meet weekly and begins Tuesday, March 1st at 6:45 p.m. You can sign up on the app, weekly email, or at the TV stand in the lobby. Pathways of Grace is our spiritual disciplines class designed to help followers of Jesus continue to grow in their faith. This Next Steps class is for anyone seeking to know God better and understand His will. You'll learn practical and encouraging methods for studying God's Word, how to pray for engagement with God and His purposes, and other disciplines that will foster spiritual growth and maturity. Take your next step in following Jesus with Pathways of Grace starting March 6th, a 6-week course held on Sunday mornings at 11:15. You can register on the app or weekly email. Finding quality time to spend with our loved ones can be difficult. That's why our kids ministry is hosting a roller skating event for families. Bring your family and friends to join us at Skateaway on Saturday, March 19th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Admission is free and skate rental costs $3 per person. We have the rink reserved exclusively for the event and will be awarding a prize to the family or group with the most creative or coordinating outfits. We'll see you at the rink. Thanks again for being here with us this weekend. If you need anything while you're here today, visit the welcome desk in the lobby. For more information about Calvary, please visit us online at cbfc.net and follow us on social media. Now, let's get started.
Coordinating outfits. I can't wait to see those pictures. Will you please stand? We're going to worship our God together.
Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy works with joy surround thee, earth and heaven reflect thy rays. Stars and angels sing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thou art giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest. Thou our Father, Christ our brother, all who live in love are thine. Teach us how to love each other, lift us to the joy divine.
Let's sing about God's goodness.
God good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. In all my days, I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. In the darkest nights, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Great faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. And all I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
What a privilege it is to sing about the faithfulness of God. Would you pray with me real quick? Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity today to come and sing truths about you, Lord, to be able to gather here together as a family with no risk of persecution and no fear of damage to ourselves or our building, God. What a privilege. We thank you for the opportunity, and I pray that we would take full advantage of it this morning, God. There's people in this family, Lord, who are struggling with things right now, whether it's health or finances, whether it's family issues, whether they're dealing with the loss of a loved one, God. And I just pray that they would see your faithfulness this morning. They would know and understand that your faithfulness and your goodness and your compassions are not variable based on our circumstances, God, but they are solid, and on you our life can rest. We want to lift up our brothers and sisters in Ukraine this morning, God, who this Sunday morning looks very different for them. They may have even just a week ago been able to gather, maybe with some fear and some concern about the future, but nothing like they're experiencing today, God. And so we just want to join the chorus of voices across the world that are praying for people there. I pray for a swift end to conflict there. I pray for justice to be done. I pray for world leaders to take action and to exercise wisdom and in how they're dealing with this, God. And I just pray most of all for protection of souls there in Ukraine and in Russia, God, that people would come to know you and would be kept safe until they can hear your gospel if they haven't already, Lord. We can't imagine what they're going through, but we know that we have people in this church family who are closely related there, who are either living in Ukraine or they're deployed there currently or they're going to be deployed there, God, and we just lift all of those people up. I pray that they would be a light to the people that they encounter there, that they would show hope in your faithfulness, not in their circumstances, God, but in you, who never changes. Your compassions never fail, and you bring blessing through disaster, God. And so we're just hopeful that that is what you're going to do in this situation, and we look forward to seeing how things are resolved. And until they are, God, we continue to just lift up our brothers and sisters there. We love you and we trust you. It's in your holy name we pray. Amen. Awesome. Good morning, Calvary. How are you today? Yes, that's right. That's right. Whatever you said, it's correct. Because it's for you. So that's true. I'm so glad that you are here with us this morning. If you're joining us in person, thanks for being here. If you're here with us online, Great to think of you here. I can't see you, but hopefully we'll see you soon. My name is Thomas. If we haven't met before, I'm the student ministry director here, so I'd love to get to know you after the service if we haven't met. But I am going to be leading us this morning as we continue in our series, Guarding Your Heart. We are excited because this is an important series. Guarding our heart is really important. It comes from an idea in Proverbs that says, guard your heart because it directs the course of your life. Other translations say it's the wellspring of life, so all of life comes from your heart, both literally because it pumps your blood and figuratively because what you allow to sit in your soul is what determines the direction that your life takes. And so it's really important that we're careful what we allow to get in and shape our beliefs. So this morning, interestingly, God works out timing in strange ways, but we're going to be talking about fear today. And I feel a little overwhelmed to talk about fear only because I'm not a master of it. I'm somewhat of a fearful person myself. Some of this is because I have some core memories, and one of them in particular, I can remember going through my morning routine of like getting ready for the day, and there's this hallway in my parents' house. I walked down the hallway to go use the restroom to like take a shower and stuff. That was at the end. And on the way, there's this walk-in closet. And I was walking past just like I do every other day. And my mom jumped out of the closet and screamed at me from the dark, just about ending my life right there. And so that happened, you know, it wasn't the first time and it wasn't the only time, but that time sticks out in my mind and it set me on a course. I'm just kidding. That's not why I'm afraid, but I can think of a memory like that, and she would always say, I can't believe you're sharing this in church, one of my greatest failures as a parent. It's okay, Mom, I love you. That's not true, but there's also just some other things I remember. I don't know if any of you guys can relate to this, but I had a move that I did as a kid to sort of reduce the fear a little bit. As I was going into my bedroom at night to go to bed, I had this move where I would basically get a running start from the end of the hallway, and I would sprint, and then my toe would touch just outside of the door frame, and I would leap across the entire floor directly into my bed, and the sheets were already pulled down, so I could grab them and pull them over in one big motion without touching the floor of my room at all, because we know that bad guys and monsters get us if we touch the floor too close to our bed. But they cannot get us once the sheets are over us, and so that was always my move for safety. I just had to be really careful, though, because sometimes my toes would stick out in the middle of the night, and then you're at risk again. So I just have this relationship with fear. I've experienced a lot of it. I have a couple other ones. Maybe some of you guys can relate to this. Dark hallways. Anyone? Long, dark hallways. Which is great because as the youth director, I'm the last one out on Wednesday nights. And if you've never been in this church when it's dark, woo! It's dark and it's loud. It's a noisy, empty building. There's lots of creaks and the elevator just goes by itself sometimes. It's freaky. And so I find myself whistling or singing songs as I'm walking through the hallways just to like get me to where the light is. Usually something by the Beatles that I can, sing out loud and no one will judge me for it. And so I have some fear of that. Spiders. Anybody else? Spiders? Thank you. A few other holy people in the room. Yes. Not like the little ones that you can grab like with a napkin and take outside and stick in a bush and say, thank you, you're an important part of our ecosystem. That's what my mom would want me to do. I'm talking about the ones like with enough hair to give a middle schooler a mustache. You know what I mean? Those are the spiders that I get scared of. And I've seen a couple in my life that really freaked me out. And so if I get too close to one of those, I start to get, sort of the heebie-jeebies. But it's not all fears that are funny. Those are the ones that we like to talk about. But there are also like legitimate fears that I struggle with. I'm a dad now and a husband. My daughter is going to be 9 months old tomorrow, which is amazing. It's been an incredible blessing. So now I have this fear sometimes of like letting my family down. No one intends to make a decision that's going to blow up their family, but a lot of people do. And I never want that to be me, and sometimes I get scared that it could happen. Financial insecurity is something that's constantly on my mind, not because we're in great need, but what if we were? And so I have that fear kind of always in the back of my mind. I have another fear too. Sometimes my daughter is so cute and adorable, and she always smiles, and she's a baby, so she just like unconditionally loves. Even if you let her fall on the floor and she hits her head, she looks at you like, why did you do that? You just pick her up and you kiss her for a second. She's like, I love you so much. She's so quick to forgive. But I think about the future, and I have a fear, this great fear of something happening in our family and she would look at me and say, I don't want anything to do with you, Dad. Or, you know what, Dad, I know what you believe about Jesus. I've decided not to believe that. And so some fears are serious. Right now we have, interestingly, a whole country of people in Ukraine that have probably always lived with some sort of baseline of fear, living next to a country like Russia, but now they're literally worried about their family and their friends, about loss of life, about loss of property. Their world's being turned upside down, and so those are the fears that we need to talk about, because those are the fears that can wind up consuming us. And what we know from our other discussions in this Guard Your Heart series is that we can't control our circumstances. We can't control the thoughts that we have. When we talked about lust, you can't control whether or not your brain has a lustful thought, but you can control what happens to that thought after you have it. Similarly, we can't control fear that we feel, but we can control whether or not we let that fear consume us. And so today we need to talk about what is fear, how can we guard against it, and also where does faith come into play. So let's just start at the top. What is fear? In a normal, healthy context, fear is a feeling that our brain gives us that keeps us out of danger and alive. So fear is a sensation that we get that is meant to keep us out of danger and alive. I've also heard it described, actually I think even Pastor Wayne may have described it with his snake analogy a few weeks ago as giving something its proper respect. I picture this always when I think about fear. The first time I went to see the Grand Canyon, anyone ever been to the Grand Canyon? Okay, cool. If you haven't been, make sure you get out there. It's an incredible experience. It just gives you a real feeling of scale, but the place that we went to see it, we were on a bus with a bunch of other tourists, and we drove, and I'm thinking like, wow, cool red rocks, really nice. And the bus driver said, 3, 2, 1, look out the window. And we looked over, and you just see immediately, you're just like, there's a reason that it's not called the Meh Canyon. Like, it's grand, it's amazing, it's incredible. You've never seen anything like it. And the crazy thing is, as soon as you step off the bus, just one step off the bus, you see this huge canyon. You already start, at least I do, I already start to feel the dread in my heart as I get closer to the edge. Like every step you take, I'm still like 400 yards from the edge, and I'm getting more and more scared. Like, what if I really trip and I start to roll and I can't stop myself before the edge? And there's no guardrails at the Grand Canyon. They just leave it there for people to walk up to. So you walk up, and the closer you get, you just feel this sense of doom, knowing like, if I go down, there's going to be several seconds before I make contact with anything, and nobody's surviving that. That is the sort of sensation of fear that we get. And so I always remember being taught growing up that there's 366 fear nots in the Bible, one for every day of the year, and even on a leap year. You have one. And there's actually more than that, and I think that's like a fun thing to think about. But not all of the verses in the Bible are equally applicable to us in every single season of our life. And so it's great to have those fear nots, but some of them we read and we're like, well, I don't really know how that lines up with what I'm going through right now. In reality, the Bible talks about fear over 440 individual times in over 420 verses, which means some of them have even fear more than once. And this tells me that fear is a common human experience. The Bible was written over hundreds of years. We're now 2,000 years separated from the most recent part of it. And so for even 1,000 years or more before that, people were experiencing fear. In fact, excuse me, the first time we hear about fear is in Genesis 3. We need to talk about this because sometimes we think that fear is evil itself. The fact that we feel fear, we think fear is an evil thing. It's actually not. It's a God-designed feeling. God gave us this sensation to keep us safe. And it was not evil in itself, but it is a result of evil. So the first time we hear about it is in Genesis 3:10. And he says, in Genesis 3:10, we're told, and Adam said, he said, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. So this is the very first instance of fear. Adam and Eve are in the garden. They're given very specific instructions. Do anything and everything in this garden. It's all for you. There's just one thing you don't do. Don't eat this fruit. Just don't do it. And God asked them to trust him on that. They decided not to. They ate the fruit. And so as a result of guilt and disobedience and a sudden realization of good and evil and how flawed they were and how great God was, they were afraid, they had fear, and so they hid themselves. That's the first instance of fear in humanity. So it is not an act of evil itself to feel fear, but fear is a result of sin, because in God's original perfect creation, no one was going to die. Nature was working in perfect harmony. There weren't predators and prey. There was just creation. And so what would we have had to be afraid of? Nothing. In fact, we didn't even have the consequence of sin to deal with. So we could just enjoy God in all of his goodness and glory and power without fear. And that would have been a beautiful thing, but unfortunately, it didn't go that way, as we know all too well. So, in case you still don't believe me, did you know that fear is actually one of God's names in the Bible? I know you know, like Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father, Wise Counselor. How about the fear of Isaac? That's what he's called a couple times in Genesis, because people who didn't know him knew that Isaac feared him, and so they called God the fear of Isaac a couple times. So God would not be associated with an attribute that is considered evil. You know that, and I know that. And so fear itself is not evil. Throughout the rest of the Bible, there are two main types of fear that we're going to talk about today. Situational fear, which is fear of our circumstances, fear of things that's going on in our life, fear of maybe an imminent danger or threat that we see. And then there is the fear of God. In this case, fear looks a couple different ways. It could be from a sinner's perspective, which is all of us. If we look at God, we think, oh boy, we're in deep trouble because God can't coexist with evil and we have evil inside of us. And so that means we can't coexist with God. So one of us has to go. And one of us is infinite and the other one's not. So that's trouble for us. But in addition to that, it also has a sense of great respect and reverence. And so we know that God is powerful and he's good, he's holy, he's righteous, and he's capable of more than we could ever ask or imagine. And so we give God that respect as a result, and that's called the fear of God. So throughout the Bible, we talk about both of those concepts, and there's a story in Mark chapter 5 that really illustrates both of these. And if there's any students in the room and you were on winter weekend, we actually talked about this story, so don't tune out, I promise. You're still going to get some good truth out of this. It's really important. So we're just going to dive right into Mark 5, starting in verses 24 to 26. So we're going to just put those up on the screen so you can follow along with us. This is Jesus traveling with his disciples. It says, and he went with him. Jesus is actually, this story takes place in the middle of another story. So a guy named Jairus comes and finds Jesus and says, hey, Jesus, my daughter's really sick, like on the verge of death, and I need help. And so Jesus is on his way, slowly but surely, to go and visit Jairus' house and take care of his daughter. And so we're told that he went with him, and a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years and who had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. So Jesus is traveling to basically perform a miracle. This guy says, I know that you can heal my daughter. Please come with me. So they're going to travel. But on the way, tons of people had heard the story of Jesus. And he's healing people left and right. He's casting out demons. He's making wine out of water. He's healing the sick. He's telling lame people to get up and walk. He's opening the ears of the deaf and the eyes of the blind. And people get excited about things like that. And so when we hear about throngs of people or people thronged about him. Think about like if you've ever been to a concert, there's that front section and the first like 40 rows or something, everyone gets out of their chairs and they crowd up to the stage and they all reach out to try to get a hold of their favorite musician, and they're like way too far away to even have hope, but they still reach. That's kind of the idea that we're getting. People are coming in from all sides and they just want to get a taste. They just want to catch a glimpse of Jesus. And so we hear about this woman who's had this disease of bleeding for 12 years. That's a long time to bleed. I don't know if any of you guys have ever suffered from significant blood loss. I hope that you haven't. But if you have, there's a couple things that we need to kind of figure out here. There's some realities in this story we have to understand. She was bleeding for 12 years, which means she was very, very sick. She was likely very weak. She would have been short of breath. She would have been very fatigued. It would have been difficult for her to be up and about for an entire day. She's very sick. She's so sick that her treatment from doctors has been described as suffering, which means they were probably trying some crazy stuff to make her better, and none of it worked. So there's that side. She's weak. She's tired. She has less energy than she has in a previous chapter of her life. So it's safe to say that she probably has some fear. But in addition to that, she would be dealing with what's called ceremonial uncleanness. Because she is bleeding, in the Jewish law, she would be considered unclean. Now, this had a couple of big problems associated with it. If you were unclean, typically you would have to leave your house, because anything that you touched would become unclean, which means all your property and your possessions would be unclean. And then anybody that touched that stuff would also be unclean. So husband, wife, kids, if they touch something that you made unclean, then they're unclean. Then the whole family is unclean. So chances are, for these 12 years, she was not able to stay in her home. She would have been living away from anybody that she knew and loved. And it would have made her family unclean for her to be around. So she very likely would not have had interaction with the people that she loved the most in the world for 12 years. Some of us have experienced that for like a year or a year and a half through the pandemic, not being able to see family members that we love, but at least we could still like FaceTime or have a Zoom call or something. No, she had to keep her distance. And so she is probably having some fear about this. In addition, she would not be able to go to the temple to offer any sacrifices or to learn or to do any kind of worship, because that was a place for clean people, not unclean people. And so she's also not being cared for spiritually. So what is she afraid of here? She's afraid of dying, obviously. Why wouldn't she be? She spent all of her money on doctors. So not only is she living outside of her home, but now she's reliant on the generosity of people leaving scraps of food or making donations to her in order to survive. So she's afraid of that. She's afraid she might not ever get to see her family again. She's afraid of having to live the rest of her life in an unclean status. That carries with it a whole burden that we just talked about. Imagine thinking like, I'm never going to see the people that I love again. I might never get to sit under sound biblical teaching again. I may never be able to be poured into by someone spiritually again because of the status of my disease. So she's afraid of all these things, and it just happens to be circumstances that force her into isolation, which is something that we talked about in the first week of this series. So moving on, in verses 27 and 28, we're told that she had heard reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched the edge of his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And she did that, and immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. So she's in this place of fear. She's isolated. She's alone. She's weak. She's very sick, and she's desperate. And so she hears the stories just like this throng of people, and she says, I believe that if I can just touch, in Luke's gospel, she actually says, I believe that if I even touch the edge of his garment, I will be made well. And so she hatches this plan, and it's important for us to note a couple things here. All that she has is a secondhand account. She would never have been around Jesus previous to this because of her unclean status. The disciples definitely would have made sure of that, no doubt. So they're walking through, and there's a throng of people. There's people everywhere, and she has heard the report about Jesus, and she says, if I can just touch his garment, I will be made well. She's not looking for a relationship. She's not looking for a conversation. She doesn't want Jesus to single her out or spend a lot of time on her. She just believes that he has enough power in him that just through touching a piece of his clothes, barely connected to his body, that would be enough to do more than decades of doctors. So she has this fierce belief suddenly, and it's enough that she is willing to go behind him. There's people all around him on every angle, so most likely she is not able to push through these people. She's likely on her hands and knees, crawling in the dirt with people around her, and she's just desperately trying to get close enough to reach out and touch just the edge of his garment down by the dirt. And we're told that she accomplishes this. And we're going to get to this in just a second. But immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. That's really important, and we'll circle back around to why I think that's pretty critical. So moving on, she was reaching out to touch the hem of his garment. And when she does, her bleeding stops right away. So that's pretty amazing. Jesus doesn't look at her, doesn't talk to her, doesn't say anything to her. Just by touching the garment, immediately the blood dries up. But there's the second detail is really important. And that is that she feels in her body that she has been healed of her disease. Jesus, anytime he does a miracle, never does a miracle halfway. When he made water into wine, the host of the party said, "This is the best wine of the whole party." When he feeds thousands of people with virtually no food, there are baskets and baskets and baskets of leftovers. When people are sick, like Lazarus was sick, and they sent a message and said, "Jesus, we need your help. Lazarus is very sick." He waited until Lazarus was dead so he could literally bring him back from the grave, not just heal a sickness that he had. And Jairus, the man that he's going to his house right now, his daughter currently is sick. At the end of this story, we find out too late. We didn't make it. The throngs of people slowed us down. His daughter is dead. But Jesus goes and brings that daughter back to life. So Jesus actually, I believe in this story, the details indicate that Jesus didn't just solve her problem and let her body take its course, because if you're bleeding for 12 years and then you stop, in a couple months, you'll be back to like your normal self. Your blood counts will go up, you'll have more energy, you'll be able to take deeper breaths, and you'll feel healthier. Jesus doesn't do that. He stops the bleeding, and immediately she says that she feels that her disease is healed in her body. So suddenly, after a decade of being fatigued and worn down and unable to, just get through a day without constantly being tired and exhausted, she's just restored to this fully healthy version of herself. She's overwhelmed. She doesn't know how it happened, but she believes that it's through Jesus' power. And so moving on to the next verses, we're actually told that Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "Do you see the crowd pressing around you? And yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. So he's got people all around him, and suddenly one touch is different from all the other touches. His disciples are like, "Jesus, are you kidding me? Everyone is touching you. How are we supposed to identify the person?" But it doesn't take long. They start looking, and this woman realizes, if we go on to the next verse, that she cannot stay hidden. Knowing what had happened to her, she came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. I don't know about you guys, but maybe you've experienced this, like if you're outside working for hours on a hot day and you walk into like really cold air conditioning. Or maybe you've received a blood transfusion before when you're feeling down and out. Or you have a serious health condition. It changes your life. It changes your mannerisms. It totally shifts the trajectory of your day. And so this woman was totally healed, and she felt it, and she was probably overwhelmed. And so of all the people that were following Jesus and trying to get a touch, there was one woman probably sitting in the dirt, or maybe she stood and jumped for joy. And she was not paying attention to that because she was so overwhelmed and trembling with the power that she had just experienced. And so Jesus identifies her, and the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Now, you can see here that she's still fearful, but I think this is a different type of fear. This is a fear that leads her to believe that Jesus is worthy of hearing the whole truth. So she's not afraid of the consequences. She's not afraid that she's going to get punished by Jesus. She has fear because she just experienced the raw power of God, the creator of the universe, coursing through her body to heal a disease that no doctor could fix and that time would not heal instantly. And so she gives him the whole truth, and she fears, not out of a sense of danger, but out of a sense of unworthiness, to deal with and experience the power of God. And so she tells him the whole truth, and Jesus responds in a really beautiful way that I want to focus on here as we bring this story to a close. If we can put up verse 34. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Jesus, God on earth, the physical manifestation of the Creator God, the Word that became flesh, the only one that can give anyone in the world identity, looked her in the eyes and called her daughter. He could have said, "Woman." He could have said, "You." He could have just said, "Go in peace." He could have said, "Get up and walk," like he said to other people before. But he looks at her and he says, "Daughter." And I don't think it's an accident, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I think Jesus knew, being a miracle worker that does not go halfway with miracles, I'm going to fix her problem. I'm going to restore her body to what it once was before this 12 years of bleeding. And then I know that she's having some identity issues because she hasn't known or felt or understood love from anyone in her life for the last 12 years. And he looked at her and he called her daughter, which is a word that is, I can tell you from experience, just like the most intimate love that you can feel for someone. He doesn't go halfway. He goes above and beyond every time he does a miracle. He could have just stopped and let her body take its course. He could have told her to go in peace. But instead, he restores her body, he fixes her problem, and he restores her identity. He gives her a new identity and links her to him in a way that can never be undone. He speaks to her with intention and identifies her with a name that makes her as closely related as someone can be. But catch this. Her faith made her well, Jesus says, by his power, while she was still afraid. She felt fear before and she felt fear after. So it's safe to say she was feeling fearful in the middle. She was crawling on the ground amidst a bunch of people who really she shouldn't have been around, because unclean people were supposed to declare unclean, 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 so that they didn't accidentally pass on that uncleanliness to someone else. So she is afraid this whole time, and God heals her. Jesus heals her while she was afraid. He didn't say, "Nice try, honey, try faith over fear next time." He takes her where she is without having her fear figured out, and honors her faith and outpours his power to heal her problems. She was willing to take action and follow behind him, get on the ground and crawl behind him just to get a feel of his clothing. So what does all of this mean for you? Simply put, whatever you're going through, whatever your circumstances are, whatever you're afraid of right now, God already has control over that. He's already in charge. To put it succinctly, whatever you're in, God owns. Whatever you're in, God owns. Nothing is a mystery to him. Nothing is a surprise. Nothing that you're going through is uncommon or too much for him to handle. He knows. And so he made you. He holds you together. He designed you with intent and purpose. And if you're listening to this right now, I'm confident that somewhere in your life you have some fear, and that's okay. You don't have to fix that fear by yourself. In fact, you can't. God wants desperately to call you son and daughter. He wants to bring you through your circumstances and show you the abundant blessings that can come on the other side. And I know this not because He gave us the Bible and stories in the Old Testament, and not just because he sent messengers and angels, but because he literally came, the God that breathed out the universe into existence, put on skin, and he came down onto the earth with dirt between his toes. He walked on the ground, the very same earth that we walk on, and he got down on the ground and talked to people who he shouldn't have been talking to according to the customs and the standards of the day, and he healed them. He didn't go halfway. He went the whole way, above and beyond what they needed or expected, and he called them sons and daughters and friends. He lived a perfect life that perfectly met the standard of God without a single flaw, which should have exempted him from death, but instead, he chose to go and die anyway, as a perfect sacrifice to make up for the sin and the brokenness of the world and of each of us. By faith, just like this woman, anyone can be brought into Jesus' life and to continue to follow him. And so you can have blessings through your circumstances. God can help you to refocus your fear. If you haven't trusted in Jesus, then today needs to be the day. All you have to do is reach out in faith, just like this woman, and tell him, Jesus, today is the day. I'm broken, and I can't fix it myself. I have fear that I can't fix myself, but I know that you can. You need to reach out and tell him that. Please, God, I know that you have the power to forgive me, to make me a son and a daughter. And I believe that you're going to do it today. It's not by my work, but by your grace that I could be saved. And so you could do that right now. Prayer is a conversation. It happens out loud. It can happen in your head. It doesn't matter. However you want to pray it is up to you. We can't control whether we feel fear. We can't control whether we think a lustful thought. We can't control whether we hear false teaching, but we can control what sinks into our hearts and what we allow our minds to dwell on and our hearts to shape into our beliefs. And so for everyone here this week, if you prayed a prayer for the first time and you're willing to believe in Jesus and you're trusting him to bring you through your circumstances and you're willing to follow him into a new life, then I challenge you to talk to someone about that today, whether it's me or someone else in the room, someone sitting close to you in the row. If you're online, text a friend or a neighbor or a relative and let them know that you did that. For the rest of you in this room, I just want to challenge you to feel the fear that you have in your life this week. And when you do, write it down. Use a note card, type it in your phone, type it on your computer, it doesn't matter. Put it on paper in front of you so that you can see it. Look at it and feel it and acknowledge that it exists. And then instead of trying to fix it yourself and trying to bear that burden, let your faith, just like this woman, refocus your fear onto the God who created you and the only one that can hold the burden and bring you through those circumstances. And finally, after you do that, tell someone about what you felt. Tell someone about what you wrote down and pray with them together that God would continue to give you the strength to walk through your fear. Faith redirects the focus of our fear from our circumstances onto God's strength. Faith redirects the focus of our fear from our circumstances onto God's strength. And when we're focused on God's strength and not relying on our own, that's when God can do his greatest work. Would you pray with me real quick? Dear Lord, I thank you for today, for this opportunity to hear from your word, God. For those of us feeling fear right now in this moment, I pray that we would use our faith to refocus that fear on you, God. You alone are worthy of our praise, and you alone should be the subject of our fear because you are the only one that can make any difference in our eternal state. We can't do it, but you can, God. And we're trusting you to bring us through the circumstances that we're experiencing. For those of us who are not feeling fear right now in this moment, I praise you, God, that you are so good, that you have freed some people from that today. But when they feel fear this week, God, I pray that they would identify it, that they would know it, that they would allow themselves to feel it, but just long enough that they can put it on you, God, the one that can bear any burden, the one that can bring us through any circumstance, and the one that never heals halfway but always goes above and beyond what we expect. We love you, God, and we trust you, and we're counting on you to bring us through our circumstances this week, this month, this year, and for the rest of our lives. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Will you please stand as we close singing, God will take care of you.
Dismayed, whatever betide, God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of love abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. No matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. Lean, weary one upon his breast, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you.
He will. It's true. Thank you for being here with us this morning. I pray that this week you feel fear and you're willing to give it up to the God who can carry that weight and bring you through it. Be blessed. We'll see you in a week.